Declassified footage, 1939. The camera shakes in the cold as a lone figure pedals through a blizzard. Snow swirls like ash around the wheels. This is not the roar of tanks, not the thunder of engines, but the whisper of determination. Across Europe, armies were gathering machines that drank fuel by the ton. In Finland, young men trusted their legs, their lungs, and the geometry of steel tubing. In the silence between artillery blasts, the bicycle chain hummed, a fragile melody of defiance. They called it madness at first, this idea of riding into war. But soon the frozen forests would echo with spokes instead of engines, and history would record the sound of courage as a simple metallic click. The Soviet invasion came with tanks and trumpets of confidence. 500,000 men pouring over the border, sure of victory. Against them stood farmers and students, faces hidden beneath layers of frost, armed with rifles, skis, and bicycles. The world expected collapse in days. Instead, these improvised cyclists became specters of the timberline. They moved along forgotten logging trails, emerging behind Soviet convoys like ghosts. When engines stalled, they glided past the steel carcasses. When supply trucks bogged down, they threaded between them, rifles resting on handlebars. Each kilometer they gained was paid for in breath and muscle. What fuel burned in their bodies outlasted the diesel that froze solid in enemy tanks. Winter tightened its fist, -40 degrees, the air itself a weapon. Metal screamed when touched. Horses froze mid-step, glassy eyes staring into eternity, yet the bicycles survived. No radiators to crack, no oil to congeal, just wire, rubber, and willpower. Soldiers wrapped rags around handlebars to keep their fingers from sticking. They thawed chains over campfires, then plunged back into the dark. Scouts carried orders between outposts, pedaling through snow so deep it swallowed the wheels. 40 kilometers in a night, that was their promise. Each message delivered meant another ambush waiting, another Soviet column broken. Between exhaustion and frostbite, there was only rhythm, the steady turn of pedals that refused to stop. On the right road, the Red Armies might turn to chaos. Endless tanks and trucks jammed on a narrow track, their engines dead, their crews starving. In the shadows of the forest, small Finnish detachments struck like wolves. They came on skis, then on bicycles. Darting in and out of the tree line, ammunition wagons exploded. Communication lines vanished under snow. When daylight came, the Soviets found only empty camps and wheel tracks fading into the pines. An entire division dissolved, not from superior weapons, but from a slower heartbeat that could not keep up with the cadence of men on wheels. The hum of those spokes was the sound of empire cracking. When the Winter War ended after 105 days, Finland still stood. The cost was unbearable, but so was the pride. The world remembered the ski troops, the white-clad ghosts with rifles, but few recalled the bicycles that stitched their courage together. Those simple frames carried messages, hope, and survival across a frozen nation. And somewhere far away, in a warm Tokyo conference room, officers watched the newsreels and took notes. If bicycles could cross snow and outmaneuver tanks in the cold, what might they do in a jungle? 2 years later, those same quiet wheels would return. This time rolling through the steaming green of Malaya, the world was about to witness the fastest invasion ever waged without an engine. December 1941. Rain hammered the jungles of Malaya as an army appeared out of the mist, silent, tireless, and rolling on wheels. Japan's 25th Army landed at Singora and Patani, not with columns of tanks, but with thousands of soldiers on bicycles. The British expected engines. not pedals, and by the time they heard the first rifle bursts, the enemy was already behind them. Each cyclist carried his rifle across the handlebars, rations tied to the rear rack, and enough determination to replace an entire fuel convoy. When bridges were blown, they carried their bicycles on their shoulders. When tires shredded, they rode on the metal rims until sparks trailed behind. They advanced 60 kilometers in a single day through mud that swallowed trucks whole. At Jitra, Britain's strongest defensive line, cyclists flanked trenches faster than reports could reach headquarters. The defenders, waiting for tanks, fought shadows instead, swift shapes weaving through fog, appearing where no road existed. By January, the invaders had covered 500 kilometers. By February, they reached Johor and crossed into Singapore on rafts with their bicycles lashed on top. 70 days after the first landing, the Gibraltar of the East surrendered. The world saw an empire humbled by an army that moved without fuel. It was not steel that crushed Singapore. It was rhythm, silence, and the relentless turning of wheels through rain and fire. By 1954, another war raged thousands of miles from the frozen roads of Finland and the steaming jungles of Malaya. In the mountains of northern Vietnam, the French fortress of Dien Bien Phu sat surrounded by peaks so steep and so remote that commanders believed no large army could possibly bring artillery into range. Helicopters struggled, trucks were useless, pack animals collapsed on narrow trails. The French trusted the terrain to protect them. They were wrong. From the deep jungle came a sound the French could not explain at first. Not engines, not marching boots, but something stranger, a swarm of bicycles, thousands of them, pushed, dragged, and hauled by Viet Minh porters whose strength had become legend. These were not ordinary bicycles anymore. Reinforced with bamboo struts, wooden braces, rope lashings, and tires stuffed with vines, each steel horse could carry up to 300 kilograms of ammunition, rice, and artillery parts. Men leaned their full weight into the handlebars, mud up to their knees, hauling these beasts up cliffside trails the French thought impassable. A single porter might move as much cargo as a small truck, yet he consumed no fuel, required no spare parts, and made almost no sound. Day after day, night after night, these bicycles climbed the mountains. Some were pushed by 2 men, some by teams of 4. When the wheels jammed in mud, the porters lifted them like wounded animals, refusing to abandon a single load. Behind them, the supply trails grew darker and narrower until they resembled veins feeding a giant heart. And when the French guns finally fell silent under the crushing weight of Viet Minh artillery, they could not believe what they saw in captured photographs. Artillery dug into the peaks, supplied entirely by bicycles. In that moment, the lesson echoed from Finland to Malaya to Vietnam. Engines may define an army, but endurance defines victory. And sometimes the fate of empires depends on the quiet turning of wheels in the dark.